I am fired up. I don't know what to do with all these notes. I could probably go one straight hour solo on talking about the NBA based off of the weekend Monday. Certainly not all the stuff that we saw on Tuesday because we didn't see very much. But I don't know. I probably shouldn't do that. So I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can. Maybe we'll bring Cerruti in here in a little bit. But I have so much stuff down that I want to talk about. And by the way, I watched Magic Johnson's first ever NBA game. That was the walk-off win, skyhook by Kareem against the San Diego Clippers. They're going up against World Be Free. Brett Musburger was calling Lloyd. I think every 5 or 10 minutes, Musburger was mentioning how hot some guy's wife was. Or his girl. It was actually like, oh, wow, okay, now we're going back 40 years. This is retroactively kind of weird. And he would just, Musburger, be super complimentary. He'd be like, oh, his wife is quite the looker. And then the other guy would be like, that's right. And so it was kind of this, a different approach to broadcasting an NBA game. But then you're watching the end and Magic is playing off the ball and takes like a mid-range jumper that he clanks on a huge possession. And you're going, yeah, Magic Johnson off the ball as a 6'8", 6'9" point guard. And then, Kareem just so, like, he didn't even have to be smooth with some of his stuff. He was just so much bigger than other guys. I think Sven Nader was trying to beat up on him. He like ripped his jersey, and his jersey was, but then that was the other thing too, is you watch these older games and you're expecting somebody to have their head cut off on a drive to the hoop. And you're like, oh no, actually the guy just made a layup in the paint and no one killed him. Weird. And that's always one of my biggest things is whenever we're talking about eras, like, yeah, harder fouls were harder and we didn't have the flagrant 1 and 2 love affair that we have now. But I'm just telling you, go back and watch some of those games. Watch games. Guys drive to the hoop. It happens. But it was just kind of funny to see Magic be like, okay, I'm going to be off the ball for some of these major key positions. And then it was funny, too, because they were like, the scouting report says he's not great on defense. Again, I don't know that anybody ever talked about Magic defensively first. But it's just, hey, this guy's number one, the Magic Man. Here he is, first game. Again, I think it was in San Diego. And Wes and Bus were down there watching it. And they put them on TV for a little bit. But there was a huge Lakers. And then they had Kareem's first game with Milwaukee. So that was kind of cool. All right. So I went 2.5 minutes on stuff that I didn't even think I was going to talk about here. Let's talk about a potential Russillo curse a little bit here, because I think the 3 teams that I'm excited about right now, I got excited about Atlanta. I'm going to do a deep dive on them right now. They were 3-1. They beat Dallas to start the season. I thought they were crisp. I thought that you could already see guys taking a step up. The depth, the adaptability, all that stuff. Like sometimes depth is a problem because guys are pissed about it, especially with younger teams. Some GMs have told me over the years, you kind of need like 8 or 9, 10 guys that know they're going to play. And the rest of those guys should know they're not going to play unless it's just unforeseen circumstances. You can't have 15 guys all worried about their next contract. And it's a really good point. Where Atlanta has like a bunch of guys all kind of trying to figure out where they fit in. And then Atlanta is 4-8. Before I go back to Atlanta here, who else did I really like at the beginning of the year? Miami. I watched actually their Dallas game. Maybe it's just something with Dallas. And, they've had a couple games here where they got smoked. We'll get to the Denver Jokic-Morris thing here at the very end. And now I kind of love what I've seen from Chicago. Not really sure how it was all going to sort itself out. And the fact that DeRozan is like the best version we've ever seen of him. We'll do a little on Chicago as well. So let's get back to Atlanta. All right. So they were 3-1. They're 4-8. Only Orlando and Detroit have worse records. Deandre Hunter, who physically looks, I'll see him walking up and down the court next to Capella, and I go, Capella's thicker, but God, Hunter is enormous. It looks at times where you're like, okay, this guy's taking the next step. He's 42% from 3, but then everything else isn't good. He doesn't get any rebounds anymore. He's got about 3 a game. He's less than an assist a game. He takes 1 free throw a game, and he took 4 last year. So he is actually, despite some physical development and some movement development, and the issues with him not being healthy, because you love the options of him defensively in a switchable wing, and then he was going to shoot it from the outside. The only thing that's great right now is that the 3-point numbers are really good, and he's just not active enough in the other areas of basketball. Herter hasn't been very good. Danilo's been bad. Cam Reddish looks like, I don't know, we saw some signs, and I'm not writing off any of these guys, by the way, and I'm not even writing off the Hawks. I'm just trying to get into it. Is there a chance he's already kind of a less of a minute rotation guy? And that's seeming to come up here now as we're a couple weeks into the season. Here's the other part of this. Trae Young and the free throw deal. The team last season, the Atlanta Hawks, were number 2 in free throw attempts per season. They are 13th now in the NBA. Trae Young, in that season 2 years ago where they stunk and he just dominated every single possession, and I wasn't as big of a Trae Young fan. They were 20 and 47. He had 30 a game. He had 9 free throws a game. Well, now he's at 24 a game, and he's averaging 4 less free throw attempts per game than where he was at 2 years ago. He's also 33% from 3, which is bordering on, you start getting to like 31, 32. It's like, hey, stop taking these. I'm not there yet with Trae, because Trae, with his handle, the way he's figured things out, his lob floater game is probably as good as anybody in the league. One of the great things about Harden, when he really had it rolling with some of the different ways that they ran Houston's offense, they kind of do this 1-5 stuff, and then they just get rid of the 5 altogether. But Harden just killed you every single night with his lob, and then with him getting fouled. So with this foul rule, we are seeing players, and Trae got one last night on Ingles, and it was one of those bullshit going back up into him things, and I think the ref just had a bad angle at it. But it's impacting Trae. We see it with Harden. We're seeing it with some guys where they're kind of like thinking out the process of initiating the foul, and they're kind of like, well, wait, it's not really there. So you can see the discomfort. I mean, as much as Harden now has apparently the worst rehab timetable for a hamstring in the history of man, you can see these guys caught in between thoughts basketball-wise. And having said all these things, like Trae, if he got the 4 extra free throws that he was getting the last couple of years, he'd be back at like 30 points a game. But the other problem is, one of the other concerns we always had about Atlanta was, will they defend enough? And they defended enough, and they played with an energy in the playoffs. The fearlessness of Trae, all the things that I started to like about them, they don't defend anybody anymore. They were lost against Golden State, and I mean lost. I also don't know, I heard it was chasing Steph Curry around the entire time. They ended up bringing in DeLon Wright to defend him late, but at that point it was over and Steph had 50. They actually defended okay, I think, like the first week of the season. And now here's kind of what's happening is that, there was this quote earlier this week, and just to point it out too, like, as bad as Atlanta looked against Golden State, it was comical how asleep they were against Utah. And I pointed it out last night, and they're just going through the motions. They're looking around. All you have to do is cut against these guys. So Trae's getting beat up for a quote where he basically said the regular season's boring compared to the playoffs. Okay, no shit. I went back and looked at more of it. It's not the worst thing anyone's ever said. I don't think you can really point to him and say, oh, this team already mentally, like, they have the wrong approach to all this kind of stuff. I think they got into Salt Lake at 1:30 in the morning. I think it was, let me double check here. Was it the 3rd in 4 nights? Let's see, Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday. So there you go. Not a great setup for them. They played like it. But here's what I would say. Even if Trae is right, even if the comment isn't that damning, which some people are trying to make it out about Trae, here's who isn't bored by the regular season. Golden State's not bored. All right? Golden State's the best defensive team in the league. They're top 5, top 6 offense. Last time I looked at the numbers, Golden State isn't bored. They cut. They care. They defend, they fight, they box out, they constantly move. I mean, God, some of you teams, if you just kept cutting more, you would solve so many of your offensive problems. Some of you guys just don't care. You've ISO'd in the 3-point shit where you've just accepted that you're just not supposed to do anything off the ball. I don't understand that. And it's the first sign of a team kind of checking out. And I'm not saying like for the season, but in a game, you're like, oh, that was a terrible 6-minute stretch. What happened? You guys stop moving. Anybody that's ever had to play defense, what sucks? Guys that don't stop moving. It's the worst. You're like, oh, this guy's going to run around all day. I got Reggie Miller out here at lunch hoops. This sucks. And Atlanta can get really, I don't know what their isolation numbers are. They'd probably be a little skewed because there is so much Trae, but for, the Trae lob floater thing we've already talked about, it's not like I want him to lose that part of his game. The Philly backups last night against Milwaukee, fighting them to the very end. They didn't have Embiid. They didn't have Tobias Harris. And I'm going to make a small admission here. I forget Tobias Harris is on the Sixers 3 times a year. Now, if I was at trivia night and somebody said, hey, is Tobias Harris plays for which team? I would get it right, but I don't know what it is. 3 times a year, I go, oh, that's right. Tobias Harris is on the Sixers. Well, he wasn't last night. He's been missing a few games. So Embiid, Thibault, Seth Curry, and who's the other guy? Tobias Harris out. And they're right in it to the last couple of minutes. They ran out of offense. It just wasn't enough there. But they weren't bored. Philly wasn't bored by the regular season. You know who else isn't bored? I'm moving off of Atlanta now. The Chicago Bulls. They're 9th on offense. They're 7th in defense. I love what Billy Donovan. And it's funny, too, now that Billy Donovan has like a team of players. Like, hey, is this guy actually a good coach? Yes, he is. He's always been. It's just sometimes the personnel doesn't work out. I love what they're doing with DeMar DeRozan, who, by the way, 28% from three for his career, 39% this year. Even if that settles, it would probably counter where Levine is 42% last year. He's 32% this year, 31, 32. So, even if those numbers regress or kind of go back to where they're supposed to be, get better, regress, however you want to phrase it, depending on which player, that's going to help itself out. But I like that Donovan has separated DeRozan and Levine. Because when you put them all together, some of these guys just don't get really creative with it. Hey, here's our starters and here's our bench guys. Doc does a lot of that where it's when everybody's healthy, it's like, okay, here's all of our bench guys. Westbrook and Durant, going back to the OKC days, they never really wanted to be split up. Golden State's doing different things with Steph now in his rotation where he was always 12 in, sit 6, play 6, play 12, sit 6, come back 6-minute mark in the fourth quarter. Steph, they brought him, they had him finish the third. He started the fourth as they tore it up against Atlanta back on Monday night. And what they're doing with Chicago is, even though there's not a ton of depth, it sucks they don't have Patrick Williams. They had to go to Michael Green against Durant, who Green's actually looked better with the Bulls than he did with Boston. But still, it's not ideal. That's Patrick Williams stuff. Not saying anybody's going to shut down Durant, but I just like that they're being creative with it. And I also, as much as I worry about Vooch, I think the better part for Levine is that you don't feel like, even though he's still 20 shots per game, it's very clear, like there were Levine moments last season. It's been throughout his entire career. It did get better, where it's like, hey, I got to do this all on my own. And now that DeRozan has played this well, look at the efficiency numbers for Levine and DeRozan at this point. They're incredible. So really like what I'm seeing with the Bulls there. All right, 2 other news items. The Jokic, Jokic-Morris deal. If Jokic, and honestly, his brother as well, if they didn't have a history of just with people all the time, I might be more open to criticism of Jokic. Look, they're both guilty to a degree, but Markieff knew what he was doing. He knocked the shit out of Jokic, and then Jokic let him have it back. I watched the Heat broadcast, and at the time when Markieff goes down, he comes back out, and there's a stretcher out there. You're like, all right, what do I do here? And then he gets up. And you're like, all right, what happened? Now, I don't know. I don't really know how hurt he was. I don't know what the deal is. If you go in the Heat broadcast, it sounded at one point like the JFK assassination. I retweeted the Heat feed that edited the video to where the point was that they just sort of showed Markieff like they edited out Markieff hitting Jokic. And I just thought like, hey, this is the perfect example of NBA homerism. So I retweeted that one a little bit later. And then we had all the badass experts jumping in on everything. I don't know who I would take in the Butler-Jokic thing. I know we can talk Eastern Bloc versus living in a car at times. I think they're high seeds. All right. With those backgrounds, I think both of those guys are very high seeds. And pointing out that nobody was actually going to do anything and all that kind of stuff, like we all get it because most of these guys don't want to do anything anyway, because even with Jokic, that's a game check. That's a ton of money. And I'm sure if he could do it over again, he wouldn't do that. But for Marcus to be calling out guys on social media saying, oh, when back was turned, you guys fuck with everybody all the time. And it's okay. But you can't be that inconsistent if you're going to also be that guy. You can't have it happen to you when you do that same shit to other people. All right. Last note. It gets back to the Sixers. The depth that they have it's really impressive. You just hope, this is not the sign of Embiid going in a worse direction here. They're a 4 seed at 8-4, and that's with 2 losses. They were 8-2. The Ben Simmons update on all this. I could go for 30 minutes on this Ben Simmons thing. I don't know how I want to handle it. I actually know how I want to handle it, but I'm afraid some people may think that I'm not getting it. So I guess I'm holding off on that one right now, because I would say this, and I've said this consistently throughout. It's great we have more awareness for mental health issues, because those times where you feel like you're alone and nobody understands it, we're learning more and more that you're not alone. The timeline for Simmons is convenient. And just because you're going through something, and this is not insensitive, it doesn't mean that you're always right. It doesn't mean that everybody has to cater to every single whim that you have, as you're also basically shutting down on the franchise that's wondering what you want to do. These guys are all much more special than us. They're valued that way because they're the greatest in the world at what they do. And when we're talking about the top group here, there's like 20 or 30 guys that are capable of doing what these guys do, right? So they are different than most of us, almost all of us walking around. But no matter who you are at some point, you're going to have to tell work like what the plan is. And now that I've said that, I think what Morey has done throughout all this, the GM for the Sixers, I just think he's been incredible that he hasn't given into the pressures that other people would probably give into in this same situation where they go, we're just going to move this guy, whatever. They haven't been healthy, minus Simmons. And like I said, they're 8-4. Morey will not give into the noise. I admire him so much for that. But the rumor this week about Jaylen Brown and the Celtics is so stupid. I'd ask you this, and this is sourced. I know the Celtics would have interest, but why would the Celtics have interest in solving Philadelphia's biggest issue right now? And if we look at the trade market, you go, I give you pieces for your problem. I don't give you equal assets back. It's just not the way the math works. We've seen it over and over and over again. So I'm not saying that couldn't change. You know, that's the other beauty of what Daryl's done. Is like, all right, I don't like what's out there right now. And yeah, my price is high and I don't give a shit. So guess what? Maybe your situation will be worse. And the way Boston's been playing to start this season, despite a better week, would it get so untenable for Boston, who now decides they got to figure some things out? But the second part of that, thinking it out loud, would go, okay, say Boston actually did want to split up their guys because they go Tatum and Brown, it just doesn't work. All right. And I'm even allowing that thought to enter my head. Now, finally, why would Boston go, all right, let's shake things up, but let's also help Philly as much as we possibly can? That's where it doesn't really make a lot of sense.